All right. Sweet. So yes, today what we're going to go ahead and talk about is UX UI design and the recruiter methods and resources that I use when working on these types of roles. If you guys do have any questions along the way, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask away. This will be an informal type of presentation, so just jump on in and tell me your experience if you ever worked within this area and what it was like for you. So going into it, before we discuss what UX UI design is, let's start with why we need these digital designers. So we're in a world of digital transformation. Essentially, every company needs a user-friendly app or website in order to keep up with digital trends, or else their customers will choose their competitors' product, service, or application over theirs. So think about all those companies who produce similar sites which satisfy our needs. We use websites to shop like Amazon. We also can go to e-commerce websites like Macy's, Nordstrom's, Target, and then we can order our products online and get it shipped right to our doorstep. Also, we no longer need to go to the bank. We can deposit our checks by taking a picture of it on our phone and getting it deposited right to our bank account. Also, we can transfer money with apps like Venmo. Oh, also, we have food delivery services like DoorDash and Grubhub, and streaming apps such as Hulu, Netflix, and Prime. And there's a whole bunch of other apps out there that's good for productivity, wellness, entertainment, and so much more. So since we have websites for practically everything, companies need to hire these UX designers to identify and solve the problems that us as users face within these websites. And they'll need UI designers to create an intuitive, aesthetically pleasing interactive interface within that website. So, as more companies proceed to virtualize products and services, they will also need these designers to create the experience us as users have with it. Um, so going into that, the key to a successful product design all comes down to the user experience and the user interface. You can't have one without the other. And essentially, what I mean by that is it doesn't matter how great of an idea this app is if it's horrible to look at. It's not pretty, doesn't make sense when you're looking at it, and also if it's not easy to use and navigate around. So the goal of these designers is to allow us users to use the site without needing to think so hard about how to navigate around it. Even if this user has never been on this website ever before, they should still know how to get from point A to point B without any hesitation onto where to go next. So in simple terms, they're making it an easier experience for users to complete that task that they went on there for, such as ordering your food or paying a bill or even sending a message to your friend via social media. It shouldn't be hard to find those items to complete that task, such as finding that send button when you're sending that friend that message. The design of the app should be easy for you to complete that task, since the design should have a flow that makes sense for the user. So if you guys look at the picture that I've included above or on to the right, you can see the one with the X is not so great of a user experience compared to the picture to the right. And the reason why is if you guys look at the better user experience, the one with the check mark, you can see, so if let's just say this is a mobile quiz for young children, let's just say ages 4 to 7, let's say that. Um, what this, let's just say what this designer has decided to do is if this kid maybe has trouble reading, they have the iconography right next to it to make it easier for this kid to complete this quiz. Or like just say if it's for any ages and maybe someone has trouble reading such small font, maybe that icon right there will help see the font as, even though it's small, they'll help understand what that says if they don't got their glasses on. Also too, you can see the progress bar up at the top, and it shows, okay, 1 out of 5 questions. So the user knows how many more questions they have to answer to finish that task. If you guys look at the picture to the left with the not so great of a user experience, for all this user knows, there could be like 50 questions that they have to answer. And if they don't know how many they have to go, they can, oops, sorry, my screen went black. One moment. Sorry, guys. Can you guys see me? Is everything good? Sorry, my screen went black, but now I can see everything. Cool. All right, just wanted to make sure. But as I was saying is, for all the user knows on the not so great user experience, it could be 50 questions that they have to answer. So they might not finish completing it. They might just go back and just do something else. Also, you can see the blue continue bar with the better user experience is a lot bigger and easier to see. And they also put little check boxes so they know that user knows, oh, you're supposed to select it. So it's these simple little things that they add to it to make it easier for that user to complete that task. So as we know, companies are hiring UX UI designers more than ever. We hear the term UX design and we hear the term UI design, and we know they're designing an app. However, although UX and UI terms can be used interchangeably, they also have their differences. So let's go ahead and explain what those are. UX design, when designing a product, focuses on how that product works and how people interact with it. So it's creating the mechanics of the interface. So think of it like the strategy side on how that app should be designed based on the users. So UX designers will ask questions like why. They will understand, they would get a better idea of their users and understand what their motivations, values, and views are and why. And then once they do that, they'll ask questions like what? Well, what kind of functionalities and features can we add to this application? However, it needs to overall encompass the motivations, values, and views of this user so that they would want to use it. And then they would ask questions like how? Well, how can we implement accessibility and aesthetics to our design so that all users can use it, while also focusing on the functionalities and features of our product, while also encompassing the motivations, values, and views of our users. So going from that, you guys can often hear UX design as interaction design. And what they are doing is understanding the most efficient, effective, and satisfying way people can interact with that product. So what they're doing, they're providing a meaningful yet relevant experience for the user. Because why would the user want to use it if it's not meaningful to them and not relevant for them? And they can do this by improving the usability, the usefulness, and desirability of that product. Some deliverables to keep in mind when looking for UX interaction design focused candidates will involve them gathering requirements. And this is when they're going to understand the users and identify problems. And they can do this through UX research, user personas, storyboarding, scenarios, and then they would get into the ideation phase. And this is when they're creating a whole bunch of ideas for designs. So they can, do some sketches, some product maps, wireframes, mock-ups, user flows, task flows. And then they would get into testing, such as usability testing, usability reviews, accessibility reviews, analytic reports, and so much more. So overall, UX design encompasses the aspects of interaction. So are we swiping up, swiping down? Are we tapping? How are we navigating around it? So they're focusing on the aspects of interaction while also focusing on that user's journey to solve that problem, to finish that task. Jumping into UI design, so user interface design. This is going to focus on the graphical layout of the product, in which the users are going to find easy to use and also pleasurable to look at. So they're going to utilize tangible visual elements on that screen. So anything you guys see on the screen, that's a user interface. So what they're going to do is they're going to utilize all those little tangible elements to enhance the experience and interaction of that product. So keep in mind, although there is plenty of room for creativity, each platform that they design will have its set of design standards. So they really need to make sure that they're following by the brand standards of that company. You got to make sure, they're sticking, using the right colors, using the right icons, but also they need to make sure that they are sticking to each platform's design language. So if they're going to be, designing for an, let's say an Apple native app, when you download it from the Apple Store, they will need to understand Apple HIG, so Human Interface Guidelines. So keep in mind too that a good design will enhance the value and quality of the product. If it looks outdated, and it's all grainy and doesn't look pretty, you might not trust it and you don't want to use it because maybe you might fear it's going to give you a virus on your computer because it looks that old. But going into it, let's go ahead and talk about the deliverables associated with UI design. So UI design is heavily involved with implementing design principles. So think about iconography, the icon choices they make, typography, the font choices that they make, the color, think about how they're sticking to the color of the brand, also the layout, how everything's spaced out. And you can see design principles implemented in design systems when they're building out UI components, pattern libraries, UI kits. And you can also see this implemented in style guides and brand guides. UI designers will also be involved with visual representation. And this is good for clarifying any complex data concepts, or say if this user went on this website to read this article and it's just a lot of text, just text after text after text. This UI designer will help this user understand all this text on there because they went on there to read the article. To make that an easier experience, they will include a graph that's going to summarize what that text was saying. So they can implement diagrams, charts, icons, also any type of media. They're also heavily involved in high fidelity prototypes. So this is when they're going to make it pixel perfect look, the final look of what the design should look like. This is when they're going to add in, all those icons onto it. And think about when they're making their icon choices, they really need to make sure that it's an easy experience for the user. Think about, for example, when we want to check out our items. We all know that typically when we think of an icon for that, we think of a shop cart, right? What happens if that UI designer put the, to check out our items as a thumbs up? That can confuse users. And we think of the thumbs up as liking something. So they really need to make sure that all of their design choices are strategic and will make it an easier experience for them to complete that task. Another thing too is they need to make sure that the colors match the brand of the company. Because say if this UI designer made a McDonald's mobile app and put the colors as blue and orange, that would confuse the users and we would lose trust into that app because we all know McDonald's is red and yellow. So that's why they need to really make sure they're making strategic decisions with all these designs. But also too with it, when they create motion design, animations, and micro interactions, these are going to be a whole bunch of interactive elements, such as, when you select the drop-down menu, when you select a state, what is that like? Or how is that search bar like when you type into something? Or how about those toggle bars that you guys see? Also, when you hit submit, that micro interaction is going to be that loading sign that's telling the users we just received your information and we're receiving it, inputting it, and giving you information back. And say if it didn't say that it's saying submit and has that loading sign, that user can hit would probably hit submit several times, and that can freeze up the computer. So that's why these little micro interactions telling the user, also think about when the arrow, you see an arrow moving and pointing this way, that's a little micro interaction telling the users to go in a certain direction. So these are just a few deliverables to mention. You know, kind of as a little summary, UX design focuses on the strategy side of designing the product experience. And UI design focuses on what we see when we interact with it. Overall, both are enhancing the experience for the user, but they're doing it in different ways, which means they're responsible for different deliverables. Yes, you can come across some generalized UX designers where this manager is going to want someone with both solid UX, UI design skills. It's completely normal. However, there are going to be times where a manager wants a candidate specialize in either UX or UI. So those deliverables will hopefully help you find the differences between them to make sure you're finding the best candidate. Because UX design is all about identifying and solving those users' problems, and UI design is all about creating that intuitive, aesthetically pleasing interactive interface. So overall, you do need both a good and a way that I would like to also help you guys think about it is think about designing a house. The UX designer would be the one that's creating the blueprint of the flow of the house. What makes sense for the user of all the rooms and how everything should be spaced out. It wouldn't make sense if the UX designer were, if they were to make the house, if they put the dining room on a different floor from the kitchen. It just wouldn't make sense. So they're thinking like that. What makes sense for the user, and how can they navigate around it without saying, where's the dining room? Where, it should be, they should already know where it's at by a familiar flow. All right. Does anyone have any questions before we move to the next section?
No, I'm good.
All right, cool. Let's talk about a design strategy. So this is going to come up a lot with UX designers. And pretty much what a design strategy is a key concept to execute any design goal. So essentially what they're doing is they'll be centering their designs around the user, hence user-centered design. You guys will see that in a job description a lot too. But what this design strategies, design process, design thinking, you're going to hear it in different ways, but it typically consists of 5 basic phases. So first, what they're going to be doing is emphasize with the users. So this is when they're really going to understand and learn about their audience, who's using their product. From there, they're going to define what the problem is. And this is where they're going to identify what those users' needs, wants, motivations, and values are. And then from there, they will then do ideation. So this is when they're going to generate a whole bunch of ideas for designs. From there, once they have a solid idea of what design choices they want to move forward with, they will typically use some software to create some prototypes. And the prototype will be when they're turning those ideas into concrete examples, and will give the overall look and feel of what that overall design should look like. Once they have that in the software, they will then do some user testing to make sure it does enhance its overall best user experience. If so, then they will be able to hand it off to the developers to actually develop the product and get it launched out, and to make it into production for us to actually use hands-on. Keep in mind too, if there are like hesitations, like say if they're in the prototyping stage, and when they're in the prototyping stage, this is when they're going to show their stakeholders what this design looks like. And say if they don't like it, or they weren't pleased with it, that's when they would have to understand where what fell through, what didn't work. Then they would need to go back, do maybe define what the problem is again, and then do some ideation, and then get back to the prototyping stage. Once those stakeholders give it the thumbs up, then they'll go to the testing phase, but they do need to go to get approval before they move to that next stage. Also too, Once this product is shipped out for us users, this cycle will continue to repeat even once it's shipped, because as you guys know, the user experience is always changing. So think about how competitors change and enhance their features and make like updates to apps. Think about how a lot of companies have implemented face identification for a login experience. If you really think about that, that is a great user experience. We no longer need to type in our password every single time. Now we can just look at our phone and get logged in quick. That is a great user experience. So as those competitors have enhanced those features, other companies are going to want to keep up with those trends. Going into this, why design strategy is so important is you guys are going to talk about what your candidate's design process is. And this is also really going to reveal their communication style, and it will give you a good idea of what that interview would be like with the candidate, with the manager, because the manager will want to hear what that candidate's design process is. Moving on to the next part, let's go ahead and go through those deliverables while implementing through the design process. I really want to see how to show you guys how this flows through, because you guys are going to see this within their portfolio. Keep in mind that these bolded keywords that we're going to go through are going to be great to add in search strings and things that you're going to want to look for in the resume and portfolio. And it will also be mentioned in that job description. So going into it, in the first step of the design process phase, you are going to start with this UX designer is going to start with emphasizing with the user. So this is when they're learning about that audience. When they're emphasizing with the user, this is really important because they really need to understand the users so that they can relate to them. Once they're able to relate with them, they'll have a better understanding of the features and functions to add to their product. From there, once they begin to understand their audience, they're going to start by gathering requirements. This is when they're going to work in collaboration with business partners. And keep in mind, guys, designers need to have great communication because they're going to be working in collaboration a lot. They're going to be working in collaboration with their team members, stakeholders, and users. So when they're gathering requirements, figuring out, okay, what are the features that we want to add, they'll then begin to create a user persona. And that's like a stereotype or a demographic of your target audience. And these designers want to make them real. They want to give them a name, age, what are their motivations, goals, frustrations. They really need to have a deep understanding of who are these people that are using our product applications and services. And then from there, they're going to create a customer journey map. And that's just going to be a visual interpretation from an individual's perspective of that customer's relationship with that organization, service, product, or brand. And from there, they'll be able to create a use case. And this is just a specific situation in which a product could potentially be used by and who it is currently used by. And then from there, they'll do storyboarding. So that's just like a comic strip that shows how the users will use the product, and it's telling a story about the user. Then they'll be able to conduct research, which will identify the product's roadmap. And if you guys didn't know, a roadmap is just some kind of plan or strategy intended to achieve a particular goal. In the second part, when they're defining the problem, and this is going to be when they're identifying those user needs, because now they have a better idea of who their users are. And to define the problem a bit better, they're going to either conduct or collaborate with user researchers. And the reason why I say conduct or collaborate is because it depends if that company was able to hire a UX researcher on that team, and that will depend a lot on budgeting. If they weren't able to hire a UX researcher on the team, the UX designer will be in charge of all the UX research. But if there is a UX researcher on the team, This UX designer will still be involved with some user research, but in different ways. Regardless, they'll be involved with quantitative methods such as user interviews, contextual inquiries, diary studies, A/B testing, and usability testing. So even though I did mention user testing is the most important after the prototyping stage. It's necessary that you have to do user testing after that stage. A good user research design, or sorry, a good UX designer would do user testing at all phases, because if they do user testing at all phases throughout the design, they'll be able to uncover problems in the design much quicker rather than waiting till all the way till the prototyping stage and then when they do the testing. Also, they'll be able to discover opportunities to improve the design and also learn about the user's behaviors and preferences much quicker if they're doing that user testing, asking those right questions throughout all phases. So keep in mind, yes, it has to happen after the prototyping stage, but a good designer would also be doing user testing throughout all stages. But when they're defining the problem, they're also going to be analyzing the competitors. So finding out, okay, who has similar feature or who has a similar product to what us, and what did they do right? What did they do wrong? They'll also research the latest UX trends, like what's hot right now. And also, they'll need to look up guidelines, making sure they're up to date with ADA guidelines, making sure it's usable for all users. In the next part of the design process, when they begin the ideation phase, this is when they'll start creating a user story. And a user story is just a short, specific, goal-oriented sentence that typically follows in the structure. And let me just give you guys an example. As a single mother, I want to save so that I can pay for my child's college funding account or college fund. Let's just say that is the user story, and this is a Wells Fargo financial savings plan. That's the app that they're creating. Now they have a user story. Who are the users that would be using their product, and why would they be using it? From there, they'll be able to create a user flow. And this is just a chart outlining the steps that that user will take to meet their goal while using the product. So now that they're designing a whole bunch of ideas for these designs, now they got to think, okay, well, what would we need to add to this to make sure that the user completes their goal? So as an example, you can think, okay, this mother would need to create an account. To create an account, she would need XYZ. After she creates an account, she would then need to input her address, also her payment. You know, they would say all those steps that they would need to take to meet that goal. From there, they'll be able to create a sitemap. So this is when we're diving deeper into the each page throughout the whole website. So it's going to be a hierarchy or a navigation structure of how that content will be organized from each screen into the next to complete that task. So for example, let's just say we needed to check our items out from the cart. The user would click the cart. Once they click the cart, they would need to review their order summary. That would be the next page. What would be the next page after the order summary? It would then be the shipping method. Okay, what's the next page after that? That's the payment method. So it's those pages that go one after the other to complete that task. Then they will do all these ideations through sketching, low fidelity prototyping, even card sorting. And this is a way that they can do user testing at all phases. So card sorting is just breaking information down into individual units and asking users to group them in discrete categories. And this way, these UX designers can see categories that maybe they didn't notice that fit together before. So again, this is going to just be a whole bunch of brainstorming ideas. Also too, when they're in the ideation stage, they're also going to create functionality with information architecture. And that's pretty much just how to organize the content. they'll be doing this by implementing wireframes, and wireframes are just a skeleton of the project, which will determine the content placement. So think about this box and arrow right here, or sorry, this box with an X in it. That's going to be where the picture goes. They don't know what picture it is yet, but they're saying this is where it's going to go. This is the content placement. Then we see a whole bunch of squiggly lines, and we know, okay, this is where we're going to fit the text. Again, they don't need to actually have that text. They don't need to have the picture. They're just fitting how everything's going to be placed throughout all the screens. So here you can see on this responsive screen, how is everything going to look to make sure it fits it and gets the where you can see all the information properly. And then from there, they'll move into the next stage where they'll create a mock-up. And a mock-up is more of a graphical representation of that page and the basic functionalities. However, it is a static screen. There's no movement in it yet. Okay, now we're finally in the prototyping stage. So this is when they've, have some solid ideas of what they're going to do for their designs. And they're going to build this interactive experience with either high fidelity prototypes, interactive prototypes, or even clickable prototypes. And again, prototypes are a demonstration to the stakeholders before the development stage. So this is really making sure they get that approval, making sure that they like it. It also, they make sure that it's a user friendly, that the users have tested on it through that software and makes sense for them. And by doing this and not just handing it to development stage and then waiting to see if it makes the best user experiences, they do that, then they're losing money and time because now they just wasted all this time developing the product and then they realize, oh, there's some mistakes and they have to go all the way back. So if they're using these prototypes to give the overall, and again, what a prototype is, it's used to understand and see how this product or application works and what does it do and how should you interact with it. And if they wait to make sure to see it does make the best user experience before handing it to the developers, that's really going to save time and also it's going to save money. Going into that, I do want to let you guys know that designers are not expected to code. This is not a coding role. This is a designing role. Yeah, they may have some knowledge in HTML and CSS, especially enough to collaborate with these engineers. But at the same time, they're designing it. But let's go ahead and take it to the last part of, oh, actually, just kidding. I forgot. I have one more slide on prototypes. And this is going to be when the UI designer comes in. This is when they're going to add that visual representation to the prototype. And they're going to focus on the user's visual experience. So when the UX designer is doing the prototype, they're doing more of what the flow is going to look like. How they will probably use software to put the wireframes in. And they'll put the basic functions of it, but the UI designer is really going to add all the visual elements on that screen. And keep in mind too, the UI designer specializes in the prototyping phase, and this is going to create that pleasant, useful, and usable interface. Now that we're in the testing part of the design process, this is when they're really going to make sure that where they're going to evaluate their design to make sure it does make that best user experience. So this UX designer would have this prototype out, tell the user, okay, what I want you to do is go to the search bar, type in shoes, get the first shoe that pops up, add it to your cart, and I want you to order it. That is the goal. So the UX designer would monitor this user, going through, trying to navigate to get from point A to point B, and they'll be asking questions like, what did you like? What didn't you like? What makes sense? They'll be asking these questions. They'll even have maybe like heat maps where they'll do eye tracking to see where this user's eyes are looking at first. They have a whole bunch of other methods to track to make sure it does enhance its user experience. And once they create some audit and analytic reports, they'll be able to identify any improvements that need to be made. From there, they'll be able to reiterate and test this product until it reaches its overall best user experience. Now that we're finished with that, I just want to briefly go over the types of tools that these designers use. And really with it though, is it's not all just software. They're using a lot of pen, paper, whiteboards to identify problems. And also they'll use a whole bunch of it for ideation too. They'll make paper prototypes, they'll do some diagrams, again, just pen and paper. A lot of collaboration involved, but it's when they get to the prototyping phase and when they're heavily using that design software. As I mentioned before, you can use software for like wireframes to create the flows, but then you can also do it on paper to just get out the brief idea. But moving into it, there are software that's good for the detail and fidelity of the final look of the product. And then there's also ones that are better for the prototyping. Going into the next part, let me go ahead and talk about how you guys can identify these candidates. Obviously, you guys all know LinkedIn is great, but why I like LinkedIn for UX designers is because with designers, they will usually add their portfolio website to their LinkedIn. And once you click that, it will take you to their website, which sometimes they'll have their resume attached, or they'll have their contact information in the About Me section, or at the bottom of their portfolio. So it's a good way to get contact information quickly. Also, they might have their team members' portfolios linked when they're saying what their all the team members who worked on the project with them. So if you hit that link with those team members, and it's not all the time, sometimes they'll do it, but it's a good way to cross-reference other people that worked with that designer. And if you already like one design, chances are, their other designs will be good too. And they'll probably be in the same geographical region. Also, there's a whole bunch of UX design groups and meetups. Great for meeting people. I'm part of Iterate UX. It's a great meetup group that happens on Wednesdays if you guys are interested. But not only do you get to meet a whole bunch of candidates, looking for opportunities, but it also gives you the opportunity to learn more about UX design. And also what they'll do sometimes is one person would share their portfolio as if it was a interview presentation. And then everyone will give in their feedback. So it's really cool too, because you can get a lot of information from these meetups. In addition, there's Amazing Design People List, which was created right as COVID started with people looking for jobs, tons of great candidates there. There's Angel List, Women Who Design, Dribbble, Behance, Discord. I even joined a Slack, which tons of people are saying, oh, I'm interested, putting in their resumes on there. But overall, a simple Google X-ray search is perfect to find designer candidates because, as I mentioned before, they usually have a website. So in that, bracket, when you go in URL or in title, you do that bracket, so you can go resume or Vitae or CV or portfolio or Dribbble, put that in there and oh my gosh, well, obviously you put in your other search strings, put in those job titles, but there will be tons of candidates that come in through that Google search. So really recommend it for this type of role. And now let's go ahead and talk about how you guys can identify resumes. When identifying resumes, first thing to look for are the deliverables. Don't focus too much on their job titles because, as I mentioned before, job titles can be interchangeable based on maybe what the hiring manager would consider a UX designer, or maybe this candidate says, oh, I was enhancing the user's experience. So they put in UX design, but then you check their deliverables and you see, okay, they're more visually focused. In addition to, say if they're the UX designer and they're on a big team, although, yes, they are doing UX deliverables, they maybe not be in charge of all those deliverables involved with UX design. Maybe they're just in charge of creating a user persona. They've maybe only created a wireframe and a flow. They didn't do user testing. They didn't do any prototypes. They didn't do anything else. So that's another reason why you want to look at the deliverables of what they actually did and not just focus on that job title, because it may not overreach everything you need. In addition, you really want to look at the platforms that they've designed for. Did they design for responsive? And responsive, think of that like typing Facebook in the URL of the browser, and it's adjusting to the different screen sizes. Native app, on the other hand, is like downloading Facebook from the app store and getting it downloaded onto your phone. There's pros and cons on why a designer would design for one or the other. And then also there are certain design guidelines that they need to understand. So make sure you try to find this on the resume. If not, ask those types of questions if they have that experience. In addition, you really want to look for their relatable projects and features. If you're hiring, if this job description says that they need someone to enhance the onboarding experience, find someone with project experience where they've already enhanced the onboarding experience for users. The managers are going to want to see, what was the goal, the project, what was the solution, what did you do, what were the challenges? That's what the manager wants to know. So if they have that experience, you really want to find that for that candidate. If they have that experience, you really want to make sure you're looking at that and making sure it's, presented well. But, if not, it's okay. Make sure they have these other things that I'm mentioning. But these are key things to look for, including the metrics. When you're on their resume, how did their user experience increase? You really want to see how many, did their star rating go up higher, or was there more users that's joined this app since this redesign? You really want to see that that user experience happening, and you want to see how. All right. Also look for the softwares that they use. Also, what industries are they coming from? If you're hiring for someone for the financial industry, get someone coming from a financial industry. Also, who is the audience that they typically design for? Is it internal facing? Is it customer facing? How about their team size and what was their contribution? Were they the lead designer? Were they the only designer on the team? Was there about 7 other designers on the team, or were there only 2? That can say a lot to the work that they've done. And also, what was that environment like? Was it more of a startup environment when it's slower paced? You're probably going to find a more generalized candidate, or coming from both UX and UI design, having both solid skills, because probably it was a smaller team. They're handling a lot more deliverables, working a lot faster pace. Regulated, on the other hand, you'll typically find someone who has a core focus on either UX or UI design. It's a lot slower pace. They have to follow by the rules, regulations, and guidelines, and they're probably handling less deliverables. Also, were they working in a lean UX environment, which is just faster paced, agile? So these are just a few things I wanted to mention, core things to look for on their resume that's really going to show their experience. And if you don't see it, ask questions around it. All right, let's talk about how to identify portfolios, because portfolios are very important when submitting a candidate. The portfolio is going to be the most visible and tangible proof of all of the candidate's skills and abilities. Their portfolio is going to demonstrate how deep they can dive into a problem, grasp, and then also be able to grasp the design process and be able to showcase their ability to craft some user-friendly experiences. Hiring managers want to see stories about their process and understand how they made a difference in users' lives. Secondly, managers want to see an in-depth thinking process, because as we all know, tools are not the core requirement and consideration for UX designers. Managers want to see a designer solve a specific problem. They want to understand the nuances and challenges that they faced along the way. They want to understand how that affected their decision making, and then how it changed the way that they will approach the same kind of problem next time in their designs. So going into that, here's how you guys can review the candidate's portfolio. This is the structure that I typically follow. First, there'll be some kind of header image of the product that they've designed with the title. Then they'll talk about the challenge or the goal of the design. They'll move into the team that they worked with, and most importantly, what was their role in the design. You don't want them to just post the final picture of the design and just say, there we go, because we don't know actually what that designer did. Also, they will walk through either an explanation or visual interpretation of their process. So when I say an explanation, that's probably going to be more of that wordy or case study that's really backing up their design decisions and reasons behind things. The visual interpretation version of a portfolio, you will still see all the work they did. Everything I'm mentioning here, you will still see that, but it's like a picture tells 1,000 words. The picture is doing the talking, and you see the progress of what they worked up to. And then from there, they'll be doing this by creating a step-by-step design strategy. What were the methods that they used and the decisions that they took? And then they're going to demonstrate what that final result looked like and what was their learnings from that. And then if that's too much information for you guys to remember, there's another way you can look at it, which is pretty much going over the same thing, but just a condensed way. So you want to look for a star in their portfolio. So this is going to communicate what that situation is. So what was that goal of the project? What were the tasks and actions that they've accomplished? And what was the end results? So this is when they're going to put those analytics, final designs, and customer testimonials. All right. So now that we have looked at how we can identify portfolios, there are some key things I want to mention because, again, portfolios are really important when it comes to submitting a designer. And you're going to be spending more time reviewing portfolios in depth rather than just picking up, making various calls. You want to see their design skills presented, or sometimes you may need to, if they don't have it public, you may need to ask for their password, and then review it at a deeper level. But from this, you really want to utilize their case study or visual storytelling to understand their design thinking process and also understand what was that product's journey, or should I say their user's journey. And then you want to ask candidates too, if they have any relatable projects or work samples outside of their portfolio, especially if it, relates to the position that you're reaching out to them for. And guys, by asking this question, you could be surprised with the amount of solid work that they can send you. And the reason why too you want to ask this is maybe they weren't able to display all of their projects due to non-disclosure agreement. They might they'd still be able to send it for hiring purposes, but they can't just post it publicly. Or maybe they just haven't had time to update their most recent projects in their portfolio. Or maybe they just, had extra work samples that they didn't think was going to go, didn't think it was going to be efficient, or wasn't the career path they want to go. So they want to demonstrate some kind of focus. But if you're reaching out to them for a role, and say if this is strictly a UX design role, but they still want to see some strong visuals enhanced, and maybe they want to see some like design principles throughout. So this is when you can ask the candidate if they have any thing that's representing design principles, such as design systems or style guides, anything like that. And again, it won't hurt to ask, because the worst they can say is no. But the best thing that can happen is you can get some extra work samples that's going to help your hiring process. Also, keep in mind that portfolio is a demonstration of that candidate's design knowledge. If their portfolio is sloppy and outdated, chances are their designs will be too. Portfolio should be clean, easy to follow, and include pixel perfect designs. It again shouldn't be grainy and look like it was designed back in 2007. Companies are hiring for the best products and will hire candidates with the best portfolios. So if you guys don't think is the best, if you guys don't think you would hire them, if it's an okay portfolio, keep on looking out there and find someone that's a better better fit, that has that more updated portfolio. Also, portfolios are typically a display of about 3 to 6 projects of their best work, which will demonstrate the skills that they can bring to the team. And then also, the hard thing about working on these types of roles is portfolios can be subjective to the viewer. One hiring manager may love the portfolio style, and a different hiring manager may not like it. So the best way to overcome this challenge is to understand the brand and the style of that company you're hiring for, and also what were the needs of the position. Think about what was the project experience, what were the deliverables mentioned that they're going to be working on. What is that environment that they are working in? Use all those things that I said to mention when looking in their portfolio, and see, okay, do they have these skills? And that's really going to help the subjectiveness in it. All right, that is all I have for today. If you guys have any questions, and if you if you guys don't get this meme, I think it's funny. It's a picture of great UI. It looks pretty, but not so good UX. It doesn't function well. So that's why I'm saying you need both to have a good, successful product. But yeah, that's all I have. Any questions?
No, I'm good.
Cool, cool. Yeah, does that all make sense, you guys?
Yeah,
Yep.
actually, I'm clear with that.
Cool. Wow. Solid. All right. Well, then I'll let you guys go. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Yeah. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.